Sorc can absolutely blast in update 50. I just hit over 200k on my no pet Stam Sorc using Signet, static reverb, and power overload. In this video, I'm breaking down the full setup, how I'm managing overload, the opener, the priorities, and where I'd actually use this in trials. Quick note, this is still on PTS, so if something changes before launch, the build can absolutely change. But typically after week 5, what's on the PTS is what ships. What this build is, this video is focused on the selfish single target no pet Stam Sorc setup. This is a high damage version, specifically for in-game trials and raiding. This is a pure parse damage dealer. The pet Sorc version with calculated defense and more raid utility and support is coming in a separate video. So here's the build. For the setup, there's no pet Stam Sorc, putting 64 points into stamina. For race, I'd look at Dark Elf so you can switch from Stam to Mag pretty easy, but also Khajiit is great. For Mundus, I'm using the Thief. For food, we got Hearty Garlic Corn Chowder for parsing on the dummy, so green max stamina food. Or for content, I'd swap to Braised Rabbit with Spring Vegetables, which is max health and max stamina. For gear, I'm using 5-piece Monolith of Storms, the Infinite Archive Sorc class set on the body. All body pieces are medium divines with stamina enchants. Then I'm using 5-piece Perfected Mora Scribe Thesis from VLC, 2 pieces jewelry, 2 daggers, and 1 light body piece. Still all stam, all divines. For the jewelry, I'd go Infused or Bloodthirsty. They're super close this patch, and it really depends on the fight. So if you have full Bloodthirsty jewelry already, don't worry about swapping it. But if you want a little bit more upfront burst damage, you would go Infused. If you want a little more tail end execute damage, you go Bloodthirsty. All 3 have weapon damage enchants. For the daggers, I'm going Charged with Fire Weapon enchant and a Poison Weapon enchant. And then back bar is VMA Greatsword with the weapon damage enchant. Then a 1-piece crit monster set. That could be Slimecraw, Zon, Iceheart, The Blind, any of those. And then what this whole build is really built around is a Shattered Path Signet ring. It's a new-ish mythic ring. This increases your damage done with stat effects by 1% for every 1 ultimate you have, up to 170%. And while you have 170 more ultimate, your light and heavy attacks apply a random status effect up to once every 4 seconds. It applies minor timidity to you, consuming 1 ultimate every 1.5 seconds in combat. So this plays into the charged weapons and into overload, and it pairs all really well together. For CP, I'm using Wrathful Strikes, Master at Arms, Deadly Aim, and Exploiter. In the red tree, Boundless Vitality, Rejuvenation, Fortified, and Celerity. And then green tree doesn't really matter. For potions, I'm using Essence of Magicka with Heroism built in. The Heroism pots on this is a little bit of a waste when you're in overload, so you can switch back and forth if you'd like. I'd say the Heroism pots aren't as necessary for this build as they are for most other builds. Then for the skills, for the front bar, I'm using Sundering Knife with physical damage, Assassin's Misery, which ups the chance to 100% to apply a status effect, which plays into this Shattered Path Signet even more, and Minor Force, which isn't super necessary because we have Barb Trap on the back bar, but it just makes sure that uptime is there. And then Crystal Fragments. This is your huge main damage dealer. It's really a pain to hard cast this because it has a cast time, but when you use any of your other Sorc skills or other skills, it's a chance to proc a bigger instant cast, heavier hitting fragment, and those are the ones you want to look for and cast. And then Bound Armaments, this one you get stacks when you light attack, and it stacks up to 8, and then you can shoot out 4 at a time of these knives basically that deal damage. So you want to make sure you only are firing this at 4 stacks at least to get the most damage out of it. And then Haunting Curse, this thing explodes twice, so you cast it once and in 3.5 seconds it explodes, and then another 8.5 seconds it explodes again. So this is delayed damage, and it's kind of lower on the totem pole for our priorities. And then Shocking Banner with shock damage, Cavalier's Charge, which increases your weapon and spell damage based off of your movement speed. And then Intellect and Endurance on the dummy, which just gives you some more recovery. Probably Heroism or something like that in actual content. And then front bar is Flawless Dawnbreaker. We're not actually ever casting this. We're just using this for the extra weapon and spell damage that the Fighters Guild skill passives give you. Then back bar, we have Stampede, which lays down an AoE at the target after you rush in, and it does really good damage, but it also procs your Maelstrom Greatsword, which helps you do 12% more direct damage. So I heavily prefer Stampede over Wall of Elements because we have so much direct damage. Then Liquid Lightning, this is a really weak AoE, but the reason why it's so good with this setup is that it procs your Monolith, which I didn't get into this, but this, when you deal damage with a storm calling ability, every initial hit or the 5th tick creates a monolith, which then chains together with other monoliths and deals damage for everything between them. And Liquid Lightning's one of the main sources of triggering that, and then Hurricane is also another source of triggering that because they're both storm calling abilities. This one also gives you Major Resolve and does really decent AoE damage out around you, and the damage gets bigger over time, so you never want to recast this one early. And then Barb Trap gives you Minor Force, is also a pretty good single target damage dealing skill. And then Shocking Banner again, because you have to have it on both bars, otherwise it turns off every time you switch bars. And then your ultimate on the back bar is Power Overload. This also procs monoliths for Monolith of Storm, and that's why it's so great at the very beginning of a fight, because you can instantly get your 3 monoliths up. And we're only using the light attack version of this, not the heavy attack. Basically, this changes your light attacks between each skill into a huge shock damage dealing thing, and it slowly depletes your ultimate instead of burning it all at the same time, which is why it works with the Shattered Path Signet so well. So 1, Power Overload light attacks can proc Concussed. They can also proc Monoliths, which also proc more Concussed because they're also shock damage. And so the burst damage especially on the dummy up front is insane, and on the execute when you proc this again. And then for the class masteries, you're always going to be wanting to run Font of Power, which just increases your weapon and spell damage by a ton. I'd say Font of Power is even more important than Static Reverberation, because Font of Power buffs Static Reverberation to make it even better. On Static Reverberation, this thing does a crazy amount of damage, and it's a chance-based percentage thing based off of the health of the enemy you're attacking. So to start, you have a 5% chance to deal. So every time you deal damage, that means every single little tick, you have a 5% chance to deal 1,884 shock damage, which can also apply Concussed. Up to once every 0.3 seconds. That chance increases by 1% for every 1% missing health the target has. So basically this is your Sorc execute now. With Mage's Wrath and Mage's Fury being so weak, this is really the only extra execute damage you have. And so this pairs really well with Bloodthirsty, but also Infused kind of works because of Amplitude. It increases your damage done against enemies by 1% for every 10% current health they have. So this is more upfront damage. So you get extra upfront damage and you get extra execute damage with this build. Why this all works is because everything's feeding into the same idea. You need to start the fight with high ultimate, and Signet gives you bonus damage while you're above 170 ultimate. Power Overload lets you use those light attacks down to 170 ultimate, and then you turn it off. So you always stay above that cap to always get the extra Signet damage. And then Static Reverberation just procs constantly throughout all of this. When I tested the no pet Sorc without Static Reverberation, it was way less damage. That's why I'm going to go with the mag pet Sorc build when I run calculated defense and turn off Static Reverberation. So be on the lookout for that video coming next. All right, let's see if I can talk and parse at the same time. I want to show you my opener and when to toggle off overload. So you got banner on, get 8 stacks of bound armaments. That's really the only pre-buff we're doing. Get rid of that guy. Toggle on auto run, make sure you got overload going, trap, hurricane, light attack stampede, light attack liquid lightning, then you're in your priority rotation. Now we're just watching the ultimate number really, and toggle off. There you have it. Yeah, not the cleanest, but you basically just want to toggle it on as close to 170 without dipping below as you can. And it is tricky. So the best way I've found to turn off overload is you can do light attack skill, toggle light attack skill. And it should be off. Yeah, okay. Sometimes it doesn't turn off. It does not take a global cooldown to turn off. It does take a global cooldown to turn on. So after the opener, we go into the priority system. This isn't a static rotation. It's very much so dynamic. And that's part of what makes Sorc so fun to play. You don't really know what button you're going to press until you get all the information in front of you. So it's like split-second decision making, which is really fun to play and really satisfying. So first in the priorities is a procced crystal frag. That takes priority over literally everything. If you have a procced frag, cast it, because any of your other skills can proc another one, and you don't want to miss a chance to proc a frag because they hit so crazy hard. Then bound armaments hits really hard, and you just don't want to overcap this. So if you're gonna go over 8 stacks, bound armaments is your second priority. If it's going to stay under when you flip to back bar or something like that, you can wait to cast it. You just don't want to miss being able to stack a light attack up to 8. Then you got Stampede, which helps with that 12% more damage with your VMA Greatsword. Then Hurricane, which helps proc monoliths and does pretty good AoE damage. Then Liquid Lightning, which procs more monoliths. Doesn't do great AoE damage, but those monoliths are super important. Then Trap, which gives you that minor force buff and does a pretty good bleed damage. And then the Status Knife effect, which I mean the 10 seconds of increased chance to apply status effect, not the 20-second timer that it gives you naturally with minor force. Then Bound Armaments at 4 stacks. Then Haunting Curse, it's basically your lowest priority skill, and then back to Sundering Knife as a filler when you have nothing else to cast. So I tested a handful of versions of this, and this was by far the strongest single target setup for me. All the other setups, including War Mask or Mora's Whisper or Aegis Caller, all those things really took the damage down quite a bit. So I know this probably won't be used everywhere, but as for a single target parse setup, I think it'll have its place in the meta. So where would I actually use this? I'd use it on single target boss fights, somewhere like Kind's Aegis, where it's a lot of single target bosses. This would go really great. For cleave fights, like VLC or stuff like that, I'd probably look for a different setup, the Calculated Defense Pet Sorc build. That's really the main takeaway. This is selfish single target. That's what it's great at, and it is really great at it, but it's not great at much else. So my final verdicts, this Sorc can hit crazy hard. Over 200k damage is really good. I'm really excited to actually take this into content and see how we could best use it. I've been really missing Sorc, so I'm excited. So be on the lookout for the next Calculated Defense Pet Sorc build coming out soon. And I'm still testing Necro and Nightblade as things settle. I should have some more to share on those in the coming weeks. Thanks so much for watching. Appreciate you. Peace.